In a series of escalations since Iran and the US signed their memorandum of understanding last month, this the biggest by some margin. The United States saying it struck 80 Iranian targets after reimposing sanctions on oil sales, calling it a powerful response to Iranian attacks on 3 commercial vessels in the Strait of Hormuz. This morning, Iran firing off missiles at US bases in the Gulf. The sound of air raid sirens once again echoing over Kuwait city. Bigger reverberations potentially, though, emanating from the NATO summit in Ankara.
Is the ceasefire done? Is the MOU dead?
It's a very interesting question. To me, I think it's over. I don't want to deal with them anymore. They're scum. You know what scum is? They're scum. They're sick people. They're led by sick people. And they're vicious, violent people.
At the same time, he said his negotiators could carry on talking to those same people. Trump's ire sparked when 3 ships were struck on Monday and Tuesday, all plying the southern route through the strait, hit as they sailed close to the coast of Oman. The Qatari LNG tanker Al Rakayat, the Saudi oil carrier Wadayan, and the Liberian flag tanker Cyprus Prosperity. Last night, the US struck 80 targets with reports of attacks in Keshem Island, Bandar Abbas and Sirik, followed in turn by the Iranian strikes on the US military presence in Bahrain and Kuwait. Tankers once again left becalmed by the renewed violence. Oil prices up as a result. World stock markets rollercoastering back down again. Today, the mourning for Iran's assassinated leader Ali Khamenei reached the holy Shia city of Najaf in Iraq. The coffin borne aloft at the Imam Ali shrine as thousands strained to touch it. President Trump expressed surprise that Iran would fire on ships during this period, what he'd earlier called a week off for the funeral. Iran, in turn, promising not to give in. Its state TV reporting Tehran would close the strait if attacked again and strike back at the ratio of 2 to 1. It also broadcast for the first time the ruins left by the enormous concentrated airstrikes that killed Khamenei and members of his family on the first day of the war. Back at the NATO summit in Turkey, Trump was meeting President Zelensky of Ukraine. The questions, though, still focused on Iran.
We hit him very hard last night. Very, very hard. Probably hit him hard again tonight. I'll give him a little warning. We're going to hit him hard tonight.
Asked later if that meant a return to war.
No, I don't think so. I think anything that happens is going to be over very quickly, and we'll only make it safer, including for oil. It was a disaster.
How to sum up then another day of Trumpian on-camera foreign policy making? The MOU with Iran's scum leadership is over, but the talks on it continue.
Thank you very much, everybody.
The war won't restart, but expect heavy strikes tonight. Markets, allies, enemies alike reeling once again.
Joining me now, Mohammad Marandi, a professor at Tehran University and a former advisor to Iran's nuclear negotiating team. The memorandum of understanding said Iran should administer the waterway to provide safe passage to commercial shipping. Why did it attack ships travelling on the Omani side?
Because the Americans, in violation of the agreement, opened their own corridor, and they were basically forcing ships to refuse to use the corridor that the Iranians had opened in accordance with MOU. And they were taking a different route, and they were violating the deal. The Iranians, for a number of days, kept warning the Americans and warning ships, and they ignored Iran until Iran finally said enough is enough. In accordance with MOU, Iran is supposed to be in charge of the Strait of Hormuz, and Iran is not going to accept the Americans violating the deal. The Americans are violating all aspects of the deal. They have refused to force the Israeli regime to withdraw from Lebanon, to stop the killing. Just an hour or so ago, 2 Lebanese citizens were killed, murdered by the Israeli regime. Of course, in Gaza, it's every day. 3 children were among the people slaughtered today in the ongoing Holocaust. So, and of course, the scum, to be very blunt, are those Western leaders who do not sanction the Israeli regime, who have allowed them to do this for the last 3 years. The saints are the Iranians and the Axis of Resistance who stood up to the genocide and to the Holocaust in Gaza.
There's clearly a difference in interpretation, and the wording is, I guess, deliberately vague. It doesn't say Iran is in charge, but that's clearly Iran's position. I mean, was this really about revenge during the Supreme Leader's funeral? You know, an assertion of Iranian nationalism?
No, it was a part of the agreement, and it's not the only part of the agreement that the Americans are violating. The Americans, as I said, the Americans refuse to hand over Iranian stolen assets. That's a part of the deal. The Americans constantly threaten Iran with extermination, with mass murder. Trump personally threatens to kill the Iranian negotiators and Iranian leaders. These are all in the deal. These are violations of the deal.
Do you think
the Americans violate everything, but the Iranians are not like other countries. Iran is not going to be intimidated by Trump or Washington.
So what do we make? I mean, Trump says 1 minute the ceasefire, he thinks the ceasefire is over. Then he says he doesn't think we're returning to war. What do you think?
Well, if Trump strikes tonight, the Iranians will hit back very hard. And the Iranians are quite prepared to go for an all-out war and shut down the Strait of Hormuz like it was shut before. And the responsibility for the global economic crisis that will subsequently destroy the U.S. economy as well is Trump's.
So you think Iran has escalation dominance?
No doubt. We already had 39 days of war. The United States was defeated. The Iranians were hitting them till the final day. The war began with unconditional surrender being said by Trump, and it ended by accepting the Iranian 10-point peace plan. Then we had siege warfare, where the Trump regime shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and ultimately he was the one who had to come begging for an agreement, not the Iranians. And at the negotiating table, the MOU that we've been discussing, anyone who reads it knows who won the war. It was the Iranians. And if Trump, again, tries to start a war this time round, Iran won't be forgiving, neither to Trump nor those family dictatorships in the Persian Gulf that have assisted him in this war. Last night, the Trump regime murdered 8 Iranian soldiers. The Iranian people demand revenge. They demand revenge for the martyrdom of Ayatollah Khamenei, and they demand revenge for the murder of hundreds of school children in their elementary school.
Thank you for joining us, Mohammad Marandi. Thank you.
For the second day at the NATO summit in Turkey, Donald Trump threw verbal grenades at countries that are supposed to be allies. He railed against Spain for failing to back him on Iran, saying he wanted to cut all trade with the Spanish. The US president again demanded that the Danes hand over Greenland. But there was agreement among NATO allies on an aid package for Ukraine. Our senior political correspondent Paul McNamara reports from Ankara.
He hasn't just loomed large, he's dominated the room. This has been a charm offensive European style, trying to convince Donald Trump to recommit to the NATO alliance. But before today's summit even began, President Trump set his own Iranian agenda.
I don't think they know what the hell they're doing, but they're bad people.
Strikes on more than 80 Iranian sites, ceasefire in peril, the NATO response emphatic.
I think it was absolutely necessary because when you have a ceasefire and Iran is basically violating the ceasefire, we've seen what happened yesterday with ships being attacked, I think it is totally crucial that the US forcefully reacts.
Today, spurred by Ukraine's use of long-range missiles against Russia, 12 NATO nations, including the UK, committed to spend more than $50 billion on deep precision strike capabilities. But it was America's, not Ukraine's demands leaders here had to answer questions about.
Yeah, I heard the US president yesterday, and I think the US position is unfortunately very clear on this topic. And our position is as clear as it has been all through. Greenland is, of course, not for sale.
This has been an awkward NATO summit for all, although some more than others. The problem, despite an entire alliance surrounding one key member in full wooing mode, it's not clear just how much progress has been made. This is meant to be the most consequential NATO summit in decades. That's according to Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, because of how dangerous the world is right now and because of the significant uplift in defence spending by all NATO nations. That's what they're meant to be talking about right now, that and additional support they can provide to Ukraine. Instead, today, Iran has dominated. They're back to talking about Greenland, an issue many here thought or hoped had been put to bed months ago. I spoke to the Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper earlier on before Donald Trump has said that the ceasefire with Iran was over, and I started by asking her if the vast US strikes on Iran were justified.
Well, we've seen Iran breaching the ceasefire and the memorandum of understanding that they had agreed to, and they have been attacking commercial shipping in the Strait of Hormuz, even when they had agreed that the Strait of Hormuz must be opened and that ships must be able to pass. So I think the important thing now is that Iran accepts that commercial shipping needs to be able to pass. They have to stop trying to hijack the global economy.
But this is 80 strikes in response to 3 hits on tankers. That's not proportionate, is it?
Well, the UK is obviously not involved in the operations and in the decisions that they have made. And obviously what we want is for the talks to continue, the ceasefire to continue. But I do recognise the US concerns about strikes by Iran on commercial shipping and on the ships that carry the cargo to the rest of the world. And that's why I think the global focus has to be on putting pressure on Iran to respect the agreement that they had reached.
Okay, the major announcement here today is tens of billions of dollars across NATO, and billions of it from the UK being spent on long-range precision missiles. I've got the announcement here, talking about how important they've been in Ukraine, how important they'll be in the future. What it doesn't say here explicitly is that these could be launched into Russia, right? That's their real threat.
Well, the point is to have a strong deterrence. And we know that NATO is a defensive alliance, but we need to make sure that we've got strong enough capabilities in order for that defensive deterrence to work. That's why the UK is working with 12 of our allies to build these deep precision strike capabilities for the future, to make sure that we've got that. So we've got a stronger Europe within a stronger NATO, because that's how we deter the Russian threat at a time when we have seen the world really become more dangerous.
Because these are long-range missiles which could be launched into Russia.
Yeah, the fact of having long-range missile capability means that, you've got that stronger deterrence. So that means that other countries...
Why not explicitly say it? Why not say it to Russia? This is a threat to you.
It is a threat from Russia. The threat comes from Russia. It's Russia that's showing the aggression. We are a defensive alliance. But in order to be a defensive alliance, you've got to have that deterrence capability.
Are these missiles, these billions of dollars, just designed to get the attention of Russia and Vladimir Putin, or are they also designed to get the attention of Donald Trump and say, look, we are putting our money where our mouth is, please stop pulling back from NATO?
It's about our national security. So, of course, we want other countries that might threaten us, and that includes Russia, to recognise the deterrence that we are building. But, of course, we have also said, look, we need a stronger Europe within NATO. The US is a really important part of NATO, and that continues to be the case. But we've also all said Europe needs to step up and do more in the face of these growing threats, particularly from Russia.
It hasn't quite worked, though, has it? You haven't quite got the attention of Donald Trump and managed to placate him. The first thing he did since landing on the ground here was start having a go at NATO nations for not doing enough with Iran, and then say, wait a minute, I also want Greenland. Remember that? I still want part of it. It shouldn't be my NATO ally that has it. It should be the US.
Well, I have some strong disagreements with some of the things that you just said and some of the things that President Trump has said. But what I've also learned in this job is that you focus on the substance, not on the sound bites, not on the social media posts. Because what I've seen, the discussions we've had last night with Secretary of State Marco Rubio, with people across the US system, is the strong support for the NATO alliance, quite how crucial that is for our shared defence. We'll continue to strongly defend the sovereignty sovereignty of Greenland and of Denmark. That is crucially important. But what we've also done since then is work together with the United States, with other European partners and with Canada to deliver something that we called for, that I called for from the UK, which is an Arctic sentry, an Arctic operation from the whole of NATO, which is about keeping the whole of the North Atlantic safe from things like the Russian Northern Fleet. So that's what we're doing. That's the reality of our shared deterrence and our shared operations. And we'll just be clear about things. There are times going to things we can disagree about.
Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Well, since Paul McNamara spoke to the Foreign Secretary, Donald Trump has been sitting down with Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky and has given a lengthy press conference. Let's get more now from our US editor, Anushka Astana. Anushka, will what we've seen from Mr. Trump in Ankara surprise NATO allies?
You know, I've been speaking to diplomats from NATO countries here in Washington, D.C., and they say behind the scenes the Americans had reassured them that there wouldn't be many tensions in Ankara that Donald Trump didn't want around. Now, in truth, no one can control Donald Trump. He turned up sounding pretty grisly, hitting out at what he called hopeless allies at Spain, talking again about Greenland. But, you know, the leader of NATO, Mark Rutte, has been criticised for his sycophancy towards Donald Trump. A reporter asked him, do you have any self-respect? But I think Rutte will be pretty happy with the actual results out of Ankara over the past 2 days, in particular that missiles deal with Ukraine, also agreeing to unwavering support for Ukraine and reaffirming the commitment to Article 5, that, you know, mutual defence, all of which chimes with what people told me, that they were positive about Ukraine, but very pessimistic about Iran.
What do you think, then, has caused this change in tact with Iran?
Well, as the missiles, we've heard the change in tone, calling them scum, calling them evil, calling them a cancer. In part, I think it is the actions that you've been hearing about, the strike on the Qatari-flagged tanker. You know, Qatar have been a really key mediator. Gulf sources saying to me the ball is now in Iran's court. But listening to Donald Trump over the last 2 hours, I think there is something else going on. You know, we've had a lot of anti-American rhetoric coming out of Iran around the Ayatollah's funeral. The front page of an ultra-conservative newspaper today saying that Donald Trump should not be able to stay alive. And the IRGC, according to reports, setting up a unit to target senior US officials and Trump. You know, Donald Trump today spoke twice about assassination attempts against him, suggesting they could be successful. He's also changed the plane that he's leaving Ankara on from the new Air Force One to the old one, speculation that that is about security. And at one point, he was asked by a New York Post reporter about all of this. Have a listen.
You know, the life of a president is very dangerous. It's 5.2%. You know what a race car driver is? 1/10 of 1%. No. It's 5.2% is you don't make it. You should have told me you're an excellent reporter. You should have told me that years ago. Maybe I wouldn't have run. It's a very dangerous profession. No, I'm #1 on the kill list for Iran.
And look, some speculated at the start of the Iran war that assassination attempts on Donald Trump were part of the motivation. So that is back again. But I should also say that sources say to me, despite what we've seen in the last 2 days, both sides are keen, if possible, for this not to escalate.